Hey everyone, I haven't made a video in forever to be honest, but I just wanted to get on here. By the title you can tell this is a very serious video. This is not a joke, this is not something I'm making up. This is something I have been going through for a very long time. Something I've wanted to share with you guys, but it hasn't been the right time. So I am a little bit anxious, my heart is racing. I have been through so much, but I did want to share this with you guys I wanted to share this with you guys in case there's anyone else out there going through this. I just want you to know you're not alone. There is help, there is options, there's support out there, and I just want to share my story as well because I need support. Like, this was crazy to go through, to be honest. By the title, you can tell this is a story about my son being kidnapped by his father. He was abducted by his father. He did not know his father either at this time. And so I guess I should go back to the beginning. I'm not going to get super into detail about everything because this is going to be long as is, but I just want to give you guys a bit of a backstory. So I met my son's father back in 2015, and I honestly met him through just like partying, to be honest. We would just, we casually were dating and whatnot, and from the beginning, I was concerned about getting pregnant. I was young. I believe I was 18 or 19 at this time, and I already had my one daughter who I was a single parent to. And so I was honestly struggling at that point as a teen parent and just kind of coming into adulthood, being 18, 19 years old. I did have my own place, but I was just, figuring out my life. And so I wasn't on birth control at the time. And for whatever reason, my son's father didn't try to do any kind of method of birth control. Like, he wouldn't pull out or do anything, even after conversations about my concern. Like, he would just still do whatever he wanted to do. And so I started taking Plan B. Ultimately, the Plan B was not effective. I took it multiple times, and it ended up not working. So I got pregnant, and he was not supportive. He didn't even want to tell his parents. He told me he was going to join the army, and he told me to get an abortion. And so he really did join the army. I did not get an abortion. I kept our child, and he wasn't supportive, I would say, for like the first half of my pregnancy. And then he did end up kind of coming around. He was in the army. There was like basic training and then some other kind of training he was in. And so he ended up coming back in the middle of my pregnancy for like a short leave. Like, his leaves were like 14 days long. So he came back and we found out the gender of our baby, and like, he picked the name for our son, Forrest. From there, he was still in the army and whatnot. He didn't meet our son until I think he was around 1.5, just because of him being gone in the army and whatnot. And so he met our son maybe 2 times over the course of my son's 2.5 years of life. The 2.5 years I say is because when he was 2.5, this is when he was kidnapped. This is when he was abducted. Right now he's almost 5 years old, and he is with me now, just to get that out there. But so he had only met his dad twice when he came back for these leaves, these 14-day leaves. He had never been with his dad without me or anything like that. He really didn't know his dad. And so fast forward to, this was October of 2018. October of 2018. I was going through a very hard time. I was very depressed. I was struggling as a single mother to 2 children. I was also working, and then I was also in college. So it was just an overload. I was very stressed. I didn't have much support. My son's father was gone in the army, and my daughter's father was not very helpful either. He was very immature. He's abusive as well. So it wasn't a good situation. I did not have the support that I needed to, being very young and raising these children. And so I had reached out to my son's father and just expressed that I need help. I'm very depressed, like, depressed to the point that I wanted to kill myself, to be honest. I was going through a very, very, very challenging time. And so I had reached out to my son's father just saying, I need more help, I need more support. And he came up with the idea that his parents could help out with our son. And I thought that was a great idea. I was also a little bit hesitant because up to this point, up to my son's 2.5 years of life, they hadn't been there. And I mean, in the beginning, there was drama. Like, after I had my son, they tried to say that wasn't his child. Like, they tried to say that was a white baby. Just being very ugly. And I mean, we did DNA tests. I mean, that is 100% his son. And, you know, they said that after I had my son at the hospital. There wasn't that established, like, a good, healthy relationship with his parents. And so I was a little bit hesitant. They're Hispanic, and they understand English, but they would only ever speak Spanish around me, so there is a language barrier as well. They would never really talk to me, so that is also challenging, especially with my son's father not being there. When my son's father was there, when I would go over with him, it was okay. You know, those couple times I did go over because he spoke English, so it wasn't a barrier, like it wasn't a challenge. But I agreed, you know, to my son going over to his grandparents on his dad's side more so they could help out. And I mean, very quickly it became concerning. My son went over and they wanted to keep him for like extended periods of time. Yes, I did need help. Like, I asked for help, but they wanted to keep him for like a week or multiple weeks at a time. And that was just a bit much for me. For me, support and help meant, you know, maybe take him over the weekend, or maybe take him for the evening, you know, or a few hours here and there. Not for weeks at a time. Like, that's my child, and I miss and I love my child. And so it very quickly became a power struggle with them, where they were trying to convince me to let them keep my son. They were like, we can raise your son, don't worry, you can focus on what you need to do. And I was like, no, that's not how it's gonna be. It escalated quickly. From the first couple of visits my son had went over, the police were called because they were trying to keep my son, and I was like, no, you're not keeping my son. And I left. After that, I didn't talk to them for a couple weeks. And again, you know, I was still going through it. I was still struggling. So before this, my son's father and I were not together. But at this time, we were on good terms. We were talking. He was talking about when he got out of the army and the possibility of a future together, and just talking about what that would look like. I did have this hope and this excitement that a few years down the road, it can be different. You know, life may be different and we may be together. And unfortunately, that all came crashing down. So I was already in this dark, depressed place, struggling. And all of a sudden, my son's father went from single to married in a matter of 2 weeks. And this happened because he met some girl, you know, they went to a club, then they got a hotel. He ended up having sex with her, getting her pregnant that night. And then when they found out that she was pregnant 2 weeks later, they went and got married at the court. My world came shattering down, honestly. My hopes and my dreams were just shattered, and I was already so depressed and struggling. And I was beside myself, honestly. Like, there was so much pain in my heart and my soul, and I didn't even know how to continue on. So at this point, I reached out to my son's father again. I was like, I don't want any drama with your family, but I need help. You know, I need help. I'm struggling. And so he was like, okay, you know, I talked with his family. Like, through him, we talked and we reconciled, you know, we apologized. We both agreed there was going to be no more drama. And then I brought my son over there. I took my son there. I can't remember the exact day he went over, but he was supposed to come back on Friday. You know, Friday comes along and I go to pick up my son, and they're not answering the door. They're not answering my calls. They're not answering my texts. So I call the police and I let them know what's going on. I say, you know, they're withholding my son. They're refusing to give him back, etc., etc. The police pretty much say those are his grandparents. it looks like your son's been spending some time with them recently, and so we don't see this as a criminal matter or anything that we need to get involved in. So I did hear from the grandparents. They told me that my son was going to go to his cousin's birthday party on Monday. And I disagreed. I said, no, I want my son. I miss him. He needs to come home today. And they said, no, he's going to go to his cousin's birthday party. We'll return him on Monday. Okay, so Monday comes along. No call. Where's my son? You guys, I get a text from his dad. It's a picture of my son with him. And mind you, he was in a whole other state. He was halfway across the country. This is someone who I hadn't seen in him in over a year. And yet he's sending me a picture of my son with him. So he texts me and he says that he has our son, that he's keeping our son, and, you know, to take care pretty much. And, you guys, my heart dropped. That's my son. That's my little boy who only knew me. You guys, he only had a few days worth of clothes. He didn't have a car seat. Like, his dad kidnapped him. So what happened was my son's father's parents lied to me when they said my son was going to his cousin's birthday party. And really, in that time, my son's father flew from where he was stationed to where we were living and took our son and flew back to where he was stationed. And I didn't even have an address for him. Like, I was beside myself, to be honest. And like, I had called the police a few days prior and I told them that my son was being withheld, and they didn't do anything because they said, oh no, he's with his grandparents. And now here I was being faced with a situation where my son is in a whole different state, kidnapped by his dad, doesn't know his dad, has a few days worth of clothing, and then, you know, that's it. Like, I don't have an address for his dad. His dad ended up blocking me, and I called the police. First thing, you know, immediately I called the police, and they said, that's his son, you know, that's his father, and you guys don't have a parenting plan in the court, and he's allowed to be with his father. That's what they said to me, you guys. I contacted the police because my son had been kidnapped. He had been abducted. He had been kidnapped by someone he does not know, by someone who has never cared for him. And I was told that, well, you know, because they share DNA, that they're not going to do anything. And the next 7 months of my life were the darkest months I've ever went through in my whole life. It was hard. I just feel numb talking about it now because it was so traumatic. Every day, my soul hurt. Like, if you have a child that's missing, you know the pain. You know the pain, and I can't describe it. I can't describe it aside from my whole existence hurting and suffering because of how much I love and miss and need in my son. And so, you guys, I went to the court. As I told you guys, I was a teen mom. I'm still very young. I don't make a lot of money. You know, I have a low income, to be honest. And so I couldn't afford an attorney. And so I went through the process of printing out, first looking up how to file a court motion. And from there, I printed out hundreds and hundreds of documents that I had to fill out and make copies of to start this motion to try to get my son home. And it was a motion for a temporary parenting plan. It took months for me to be able to get my head together, you know, get myself in a composed manner where I can articulate what happened. And it was just overwhelming. Every time I would look at this huge stack of papers that I needed to fill out, you know, get in the proper places, I would procrastinate. It was so overwhelming for me. And so when I actually did get it all done and I went to the court, I mean, it was hard. You know, I had to ride the bus to the court. I had to go in front of a judge, speak in front of a judge. I had to get the fees waived because usually when you file a motion, it's a $200 fee. And so I had to get the fee waived. And, you know, I went through all the hoops and then I finally got this court hearing. And this was just about, I want to say this was 5 months after my son had been abducted. And the judge, you know, I went in front of the judge and I laid out my case, you know, I explained what happened and everything. And the judge, you know, immediately started off by saying he's so impressed that I was able to get this hearing in place to begin with, because it's not easy to go through all the steps and all the paperwork on my own, you know, without an attorney, without any advice, anything. But also my son's father had an attorney. I honestly felt like I didn't have a fair shot. I feel like when I actually went in front of the judge and spoke, and the judge told me how he commended me and all this, but it was kind of like, I commend you, but you're not an attorney. And so at that, like, it was pretty much like I had no power. You know, what attorney said was pretty much that, you know, I'm unstable. I'm not financially stable. I'm depressed. I'm suicidal. He painted the picture that my son, it was in my son's best interest that he was not with me full time, even though I had been raising him the past 2.5 years on my own. No problems, no run-ins with CPS, him never being harmed in any way, shape, or form. The judge sided with my son's father, and in this temporary parenting plan, I was granted 1 week visitation out of each month with my son, if I traveled to the state my son was located in, if I paid for the hotel, rental car, and his dad would pay half of the plane ticket. Mind you, I have no money for an attorney. The judge knows this. The judge knows I have no money. I'm on state assistance, all the things. And so that's where it ended, and I felt like I lost my son all over again, honestly. I was like, I'm never gonna see my son. Like, how can someone kidnap a child and there's no repercussions whatsoever? And I feel like him being in the military played a big part in it, and him having an attorney and just all the things. Then I ended up moving. So I moved to a different state a few months later, which was a lot closer than previously. My son and I were separated pretty much across the country before I had moved. And then I was only a couple states over. And so then I was like, okay, I can finally go see my son. So I go to see my son. I drive there. It's like a 2-day drive, 2.5-day drive. At this point, I'm also pregnant with my youngest. So she is maybe, how pregnant was I? I was maybe 6 months pregnant at the time. And so I drove there and I got my son, and I was supposed to, you know, stay there for the 7 days and all this and that. I didn't. As soon as I got my son, I drove back to the state where I was living. I was pretty much like, I don't care about this order. I also thought it wasn't valid because I moved. I just didn't think it was that big of a deal. And so I took my son, drove back here. I stayed here and I kept my son for the next month. And because of doing that in the state that my son's living in, it's kind of like, they're very old school. And so they have laws in place where, because we had a temporary parenting plan in place and I didn't follow the order, my son's dad was able to press charges on me. And I had no idea that this was possible, you guys. I had no idea. So he presses charges on me for child stealing. It had been a month since he had seen his son. I refused to return him because I was like, this is my son. You kidnapped my son. I'm not giving him back. I could not spend 7 days with my son after not seeing him for 7 months and give him back to the person who ripped him away from me in the worst way possible and be okay with it. I just couldn't, like, you know, call it a mother's love, call it whatever you want to, but I could not do that. And so I had these charges pressed against me and I wasn't aware. It was for child stealing and this was a felony because I was in a different state. So they put a warrant out for my arrest. I had no idea, like I said, in a completely different state because they put a warrant out for my arrest and I'm in a completely different state. I then became a fugitive. I found this out because my son's father told me the US Marshals are after you. I know this sounds insane. I know this sounds wild because it is wild, but this is my life. I'm not making any of this shit up. Take me through a polygraph test, anything. I'm not lying. This shit happened to me. So I'm heavily pregnant. I am now a fugitive. I have the US Marshals tracking me. You guys, I had to stop going into work. The US Marshals started tracking my mom's house because they thought I was living there. Like they were staking out my mom's house. They came to her house as well and they raided her whole house. Like they went through it all. I wasn't there, you know, they were wondering if she was hiding me or whatnot. And so I had to give my son back. I had to give my son back to the monster who stole him from me, ripped him away from me, and turned our life upside down. I didn't physically go give my son back because I knew if I did, the marshals, you know, this and that, I'm gonna get arrested right there. So I gave my son to my mom who returned him back to his dad. And then I turned myself into the marshals. I came to my mom's house and it was like something out of the movie. They had like 8+ cars staked out, all normal cars, all down the block, all like coming into the neighborhood. There was an elementary school right by my mom's house. They were there. They had rifles. They were fucking locked and loaded. Like it was some insane stuff. Insane insanity. And I was, at this point, I was close to 8 months pregnant at this point. And so, you know, I turned myself into them at my mom's house. They took me to the jail. At the jail, I waived my right to be extradited. So pretty much what was happening was I had a warrant out for my arrest in a different state because I did not follow a temporary parenting plan put in place in a whole other state. And so I had to be extradited to the state where the charges were coming from. What I wasn't aware of, like I thought, okay, turn myself in, I'll be extradited, you know, I have to go answer to the charges, you know, I had a bondsman, I got all this stuff in place in that state. I thought it was gonna be like, you know, a couple days. I was in jail in this state for 19 days while 8.5 months pregnant. And this was, you guys, this is the hardest time of my life. The hardest time of my life. I'm not sure if, so while I'm in jail, I keep going into preterm labor. I had to be hospitalized. I had to be admitted. They had to give me medicine to stop the contractions. I was dilating. I don't know if you guys are watching this video, I don't know if you've been around from my pregnancies or not, but if you were, then you guys saw my pregnancy updates. My last pregnancy, there was like a month from around my 8th month of pregnancy where I didn't make any updates. And that's because I was in jail. It was so hard. While I was in jail, I kept going into preterm labor and I had to be admitted to the hospital multiple times. And I honestly didn't even know if I was gonna see my baby. Like, I would go to the hospital and I would be chained to the bed. Mind you, I'm not a criminal. This is because I didn't return my son after he had been abducted from me. This is why. And so I'm chained to the hospital bed. No privacy. You know, I have guards, male guards, all this stuff. If I was gonna have my baby, I wasn't gonna be able, they weren't gonna contact my family. I wasn't gonna be able to contact my daughter's father, who has never been in the picture anyway, but still. And I was only gonna be able to see her for a few minutes before they took her from me. It was the scariest time. My baby was all I had. My son had already been ripped away. My baby was all I had to keep me going, and the thought of delivering her, to have her ripped away from me and not be able to breastfeed and not be able to bond with her, you guys, it killed me. It killed me. And I just prayed, you guys, I prayed so hard. I knew God's vision was bigger and greater than the situation I was in. And you guys, I take full accountability for not returning my son, but I would do that all over again, because I would do anything for my children. I would go to the end of this earth for them. I love them. It was the hardest time, you know, so I kept going into preterm labor, and because of that, I had to be transferred to this jail that was like a medical jail. Like it's called the infirmary. So there's like nurses there, there's doctors there, all that. And so I was put on a medical ban. And so, okay, so when you're being extradited, they have up to 30 days to get you. I didn't know that. I thought they were gonna come within a few days to get me. And so I'm sitting in the jail for 19 days. You know, I'm having all these pregnancy complications, and they haven't came to get me. And then they try to come get me, and the doctors at the jail did not clear me. I was not cleared to travel by air or anywhere because of the high risk nature of my pregnancy, because I kept almost going into labor. And because of that ban, you guys, by the grace of God, I was let out of jail. I was let out of jail, you guys, and this is like, I hadn't even answered to my charges yet in the other state. My attorney, who had been practicing for 40 plus years, told me he had never once seen someone who has an active warrant released from jail. It's unheard of. It does not happen. They could have kept me sitting in the jail. They could have waited. They could have put a hold on me. The hold would have given them more time, and it would have made it so I would have had my baby in jail, and after I had my baby, they would have came and got me and taken me to the state to address the charges. That's what was on the table. That didn't happen, you guys. They agreed to let me go. And you know, it's God. It's all God. It's God moving mountains. I had my beautiful baby girl within like 2.5 weeks after being released. You know, after that, it's not like it was just over. I went to the court where the original temporary parenting plan was, and I requested a court hearing, and I requested that the order was dismissed because neither of us were living in that state, and it was irrelevant. I wanted to get a parenting plan in the state that we were living in. My son's father did not show up to that hearing. Another blessing, you know, another gift from God. He didn't show up to that hearing, so there was no argument of him trying to keep the parenting plan in place. And the judge dismissed that temporary parenting plan. And so at that point, I knew I had an advantage, because he didn't know that the temporary parenting plan was dismissed. With it being dismissed, the pending case that I had to answer to was now a lot different. You know, they couldn't bring forth these felony charges because of a parenting plan I wasn't following when there was no longer a parenting plan. And so those charges were dropped to a misdemeanor. I did plead guilty to the misdemeanor for child stealing because I took my son and I didn't return him. I am going to try to get that expunged from my record a couple years down the road. But regardless, it was a huge win because it was going from a felony pending on my record to a misdemeanor. It hasn't affected me getting jobs or anything. So all this was happening. And also, I had a visit coming up with my son. And so my son's father was under the impression the parenting plan was still in place. It wasn't. So I got my son back, And I let him know I'm not returning my son because I don't have to. At that point, it took him some time to get an attorney and realize that he couldn't do anything at this point. And it's been going on 2 years now that my son is home. My son is in my home after being ripped away from me and gone for, he was out of my home for about a year total. And my son is in my home. It's been almost 2 years now. And but we do have, you know, life is good, but as crazy as the story sounds, that's not all of it. Like, my son's father brought forward a parenting plan after I got my son back home, and he realized that we don't have a parenting plan and I don't have to give my son to him now. And so, you know, he lawyered up all this stuff. He brought the case forth, and you guys, in this case, and when my son came home, I found out that my son was being physically abused by my son's dad's wife. So my son's stepmom was physically abusing my son while he was living there. And that is another thing that tears me apart, shatters me. As a mother, your job is to protect your children, and to know that my son was ripped away from me and then he was being hurt. His dad was allowing this devil, this monster, to abuse my son. Like, it, oh, you guys, my soul. But, you know, I have evidence. Well, my son's father's wife, her family, I have confirmation from her family of them seeing her physically abuse my son. I have witnesses. You know, they were willing to testify in court about what happened with my son. Aside from that, I have my son, my sweet 4-year-old boy, who told me with his words that his stepmom hit him, punched him in the face, hurt him, gave him bruises. I did not coerce any of these things out of him. I did not lead him to say any of these things. These are words directly out of my son's mouth. I don't even know how to wrap up this. I know this is a long video. I don't even know if you've watched it all. If you have, I appreciate you. I feel like this needs to be, you know, in more than one part, because I know you guys are gonna have a lot of questions, and there was a lot that I just went over that does deserve more attention and more detail. This is my life. This is what I've been going through. This is something that's been weighing on me for a long time. It's a lot. It's a lot to go through. And I just wanted to share it with you guys because I have no one else to share it with. I never talk about it. And I don't know if there's anyone else, any other moms going, or dads going through a situation like this, but I just want you to know that you're not alone. I just wanted to share this with you guys, share a part of my life with you guys that you don't know. And I hope that I can reach some people who are also going through it, and just know that you're not alone and that it does get better. God is good, and God can move mountains, and he will move those mountains for you. I hope you guys are all well.